welcome to Playtime podcast.
Well, we're starting now, are we?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, hello, Playtime podcast.
Where are you in the world?
I'm in Borthwick, the south of Edinburgh, near Gorebridge, about 25 feet up, something like that, off the ground.
And who's that in the photo behind your head?
It's Ornette Coleman,
It's lovely.
looking straight at you.
Yeah.
See it that way.
So you just finished the first set in the outhouse?
Have I?
Yeah.
Oh,
What did you think?
I quite enjoyed it. There was a couple of new tunes in there. Well, yeah. We'll be together again. It's a bit tricky. I enjoyed it. I can't remember what did we do third?
Fables of Phoebus.
Fables for us. Yeah. And I couldn't remember the first name of Governor Forbes. That's annoyed me.
Do you know who it is now?
No,
Do you want me to look it up while we're talking?
you can do. Sure. But yeah, my mum was there, so I kept the tune short because she's a savage critic, you know.
I had
And
lunch with
normally she says, "You should play standards. You should play more standards." So on this occasion, I knew that when that particular criticism had gone, she would reach for the change it too long. And so if I got rid of that one, I'd be on to then too many notes. You're not smiling.
Is that how she speaks?
Not exactly. No, it may be a representation of her aura, or it may just be a mischievous sense of humor. I don't
know. There was quite a big family event during the first set, wasn't there?
There was, yeah. No, there was actually. No, I should mention that first. Yeah. You become a grandfather. Well, you found out you'd become a grandfather in the first set.
I actually became a grandfather in the first set because Penny was born at 8:20.
Right.
Which is pretty much just about when we started playing.
Perfect.
And we found out, I think, well, we would have just seen it. It was between a couple of tunes, and
she actually got born. Actually, was born. Are we pretending that we're doing this in the interval?
I think people probably can work out that we're not doing this live in between the interval of the gig, that you've not gone home, put on a different shirt. And by the way, it's Orville Forbes.
Orville, like the duck.
Not Orville like the duck, which I think is Orville.
Yeah.
It's Orville as in Orval.
Oh.
I was wanting to ask you how you got into jazz.
Oh, I got into jazz through my dad, Phil Bancroft, who taught me to improvise on the vibraphone. I think was the first thing. Petite Fleur, the Sidney Bechet tune, and he wasn't really much of a teacher when it came to music, but he managed to sort of just get me going somehow. There wasn't much conceptual sort of scaffolding going on. It was just like he gave me the beaters and showed me a couple of notes, and then I sort of got on with it. And then my memory is that we would sort of just have these wee jam sessions and stuff, and then we did.
What age was that when you started improvising with your dad?
Probably about 7 or 8, something like that. And then we did a concert at school one time, playing Petite Fleur on the vibraphone, which isn't the coolest instrument to play in a primary school, especially as you need a box. That needed a box or something to stand on. And then he had a friend, Derek Moore, who is a professor of maths, played, pretty cool swing tenor, and he lent me a clarinet. I wasn't really involved with it; it just sort of appeared, and then Dad was like, "You're going to play the clarinet." And every now and again, he would play his stuff as recollection, including Charlie Mingus, Clifford Brown, some Sublime Clifford Brown, Sarah Vaughan, Charlie Parker. And he would sit down, Dad would sit down and sort of, he was often quite distant in our lives, but when he played jazz, he was there, and would really sort of, he had a smile, and he would talk about what he loved about each track, and there was a whole thing of taking the records out of the sleeve and taking the album cover out of the, out of the shelf, and then taking the thing out and taking out the sleeve and putting it on turntable, and then playing one or two tracks, and then taking it off and putting it back in the sleeve, back in, and all this sort of ritual about it. So Jazz at Massey Hall, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Charlie Mingus on bass. So we were exposed to all these sort of iconic recordings early on, and my brain was developed enough to know that the Hubert Laws flute solo on the Sarah Vaughan track was really unfortunate. Really amazing.
Herbie Mann.
Herbie Mann. Yeah, the Sarah Vaughan was amazing, and Clifford Brown was amazing, but the flute solo was really not good. Anyway, and then so that was all cool, and then we started playing a bit on clarinet, and then I got a saxophone and stuff. But the thing really took off when my sister had a pony, and the pony was given to some friends of mum and dad's, and they heard we were into a bit of jazz, and in return for getting the pony, they obviously went to a good jazz record shop and said, "Can we get some jazz records?" And they gave them a bunch of jazz records, which included Bright Side's Life by Pat Metheny. There was a VSOP quartet record, but the key one was my song, Keith Jarrett, Jan Gabarek, and Paul Danielson, John Christensen. And
I'm really sorry, got to correct you. It was American Garage.
Was it?
Yeah.
Pat Metheny. Thank God you're here.
I know.
And we famously listened to Keith Jarrett, thought it was pretty crap, and then went to see Gregory's Girl, which had a soundtrack by the Scottish saxophonist called Colin. I can't remember his surname. I should know that.
Yeah.
I'm going to Google that. So on soprano. And so we got really excited, thinking, when you're young and you've seen a film you really love, you get really excited about the whole thing. We got really excited by watching Gregory's Girl 2. Thought, now maybe that music's that from that record we got given. And Colin Tully.
That's right.
And so I never met Colin Tully, but so we put on the Keith Jarrett album to see if that was the music from Gregory's Girl, and it wasn't. But then within about 2 days, I was listening to the album every day, and that was really when it properly kicked off, and I became totally I totally fell in love with that album. And then I started listening to Parker, a lot of Parker and Red Bird Lives, and yeah.
And so how did you get into playing saxophone
then? Really, because my dad let us clarinet, so then I started getting clarinet lessons, and then I had this teacher, Philip Green, who was a lovely man and classical musician, but he was into sort of swing. We had a wee big band in the school, and he taught saxophone as well. So he gave me an alto, and that's where I started listening to Charlie Parker. I was playing it first, really, though, and it was sort of cool. It was sort of cooler than the clarinet, and the sound was cooler. And then started playing that with Dad and with you. We started doing wee gigs, and I was sort of quite a good ear player, so I could sort of get around a bunch of stuff. Then we went on these Waverley courses where when we were mid-teens, and I got some lessons. Don Rendell and Tony Carr and guys like that, and I met Ian Bellamy and Julian Crook, as he was at the time, our brothers, and Dave O'Higgins was there, and that was an exposure to a whole new thing. And then we played in this rehearsal band with I'm looking at his name now, Jimmy Grosset, and we entered a competition, the BBC big band rehearsal band competition. I won the best soloist prize. So when I was 16, and went down to London and played with a Leeds big band which had Nicky Isles on piano. Nicky Isles was just this extraordinarily warm and supportive, sort of on a musical level and a personal level. And I did the thing, and it sort of went quite well. And I didn't really know what I was doing, but I could sort of play.
Was the same chart as you've done on the recording?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I didn't really know what I was doing in a way. But I was just sort of a good ear player, and I knew I had a sense. Looking back, I had a sense of phrasing, and I remember doing a solo in the Queen's Hall with the Jimmy Gossett Band on Odd Couple. I could tell that people really loved the solo, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I just sort of was like doing it, and then I could tell that there was this real buzz about the solo, and I just like took me a long time to understand the whole thing. But it was a wonderful process and experience, and so that going down to London was a big step forward, and then I started studying, trying to study stuff and start getting to Coltrane, and
But you didn't go to music college. Did you think about it?
No. When I was younger, I just couldn't. I sort of subtly or unsubtly avoided things I couldn't do, and I think it meant that I didn't want to go to music college because somebody would find me out, and
Right.
So I had this sort of learning. What I realize now, learning was this zero sum sort of fractured, stuck in the moment thing. I could either do it or I couldn't do it, and it was very tense, and it was like proving yourself or disaster, and it was very harsh emotionally. And then much later in my 40s, I started to become more growth mindset and be interested in there, and realize that if I worked at stuff, I could learn how to do it. And learning became this joyful, slow thing that involved taking time. And I described it. I wrote a piece about it recently, and I think it's true. I described it as, for me, when I was younger, the future was sort of a grayed out button. I couldn't access it. I was stuck in this perpetual now. It was very sort of tense and fractured and insecure. And then when I finally learned how to learn properly, the future button suddenly wasn't grayed out anymore, and I had this link to the future by realizing I could gradually learn stuff. And so in the last 15 years, I've had really the best time with the saxophone. And
why is it that you're feeling ready to play standards now, and what does it mean to you to be playing these standards?
Well, it's partly because I'm getting older, and if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. I've studied it all my life, and there's been this sort of deep.
Was there a reason you stopped doing it when you were a certain age?
Well, I think I just felt everyone was trying to play original music because that's what you felt you needed to do to sort of find your own voice. And but also playing standards, you did it when you were sort of beginning to play, and then it felt like progress to start writing your own music. So, and then there was a sort of partly to do with how you define yourself in terms of the music industry and marketing yourself and stuff. So, and I wanted to be this sort of, I was an ambitious young musician. I wanted to sort of change the world, and the music industry wasn't particularly kind to me, and I'm cool with that now. Sort of it's the way it goes for lots of people. I'm cool with it, but it meant I sort of kept getting thrown out by the music industry, and then go back to square one. And I kept studying harmony, kept studying standards, and kept listening to these great players. And then I realized that I sort of did have my own voice as a player. And then I realized that as an improviser, I could do. I mean, I've got a way of playing that a lot of players don't do. I mean, I don't do lots of licks and gymnastics, but I have a way of telling stories that I sort of half understand. But I talk about this wild beast being strapped to this wild beast that plays the good stuff, and I sort of get out of the way. So I sort of started to realize I had something to say that was a little bit different, and then I felt like, yeah, I can play standards and contribute something that's cool and stands alongside, you know, the great players. And not, I'm just saying it's worthy of doing it and people can enjoy it. And so I start that, and the thing is, I wanted to talk about how extraordinary I think the music is, and the fact that these musicians managed to make this music so soon after slavery and Jim Crow and this dreadful political and social discrimination that Black Americans were living under and still are very largely. And I was really shocked in February, been doing that gig for a couple of years and talking about it, but I'd almost been shying away from it. But I googled whether John Coltrane was a slave name, and I felt hurt. I felt sort of deeply upset about it. But his grandparents were born slaves, and I was really
and I think he grew up in a household headed by his maternal grandparents, who were both born in slavery. So that was the household he grew up in as a child.
And I think that the slave owners his grandparents were owned by were brutal. But one of them was sort of reported to giving someone a severe beating in public and stuff. And I just find it amazing that as an individual guy, and it goes for the whole community and movement of musicians, that so soon after this deep trauma, that he was able to produce this extraordinarily spiritual music. We're filled with this incredible love and power, and it's just deepened my sort of. I mean, I think he's a truly extraordinary musician and transcends any genre and everything. But that knowledge, I found it really sort of upsetting initially, but then it's really deepened my massive sort of sense of wonder and awe for him as a human being and an artist, and how I mean, maybe it was all connected, I don't know. But
can you tell us your hopes for the second half?
Well, mum's left, so we can play
weightlifting when now mum's gone.
Well, we can play. I'm not so worried about things being short, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to playing, and I felt really nice starting the gig, and very relaxed, and so I'm just looking forward to playing and seeing what arises from the process. The last tune we did in the first set, I really enjoyed the Freedom Suite tune. So I'm going to do Deluge and all that Coleman tune, and I'm going to do a solo Florence Monk tune, which I did in the Jazz Festival gig a couple of years ago. I haven't done since, so I'm looking forward to that. And we're going to do By the Blackbird, which is this emblematic tune for me about the great John Coltrane quartet with McCoy Tyner and Jimmy Garrison and Elvin Jones. And there's this live version on Pablo. There's several live versions of that tour that you can find, but he's playing this incredible sheets of sound. And the guy who lent me the clarinet, Derek Moore, bought me that record when I was in my 20s. And just briefly, I think it's really fascinating. I first heard it sounded like a cacophony to me. I couldn't listen to it. It freaked me out. It sounded like chaos. And then about a year later, I listened to it. It was the most complex but exciting, strange, exhilarating music I'd ever heard. And then listened to it all the time. And then about a year later, it just sounded really simple and very pure and sweet. And then I sort of felt like I knew it really well. I didn't listen to it then for like 15, 20 years, hardly at all. And then went back to it, and my sense of time had got way better as a musician. So I was able to perceive the structure of the fast lines in a completely different way. So it went back to being more complex again. And then as I started studying it again and listened to it a lot again, my time was improving, and then I started to hear it as being simple again. But at each stage, because my brain was changing, this same recording felt and sounded very different to me. And I use that story as a way of talking about how I'm absolutely convinced that we all hear music in a very individual way. And my understanding of that single piece of recorded music has changed radically over 35 years, 40 years. And
Listen,
so
we're going to carry on talking, and if people want to hear the extended conversation, it's going to come out in not the next podcast, but the one after that. But can I just say thank you so much for coming on to do this interview, and for playing your wonderful saxophone, and for hiring me in the band, and for being an awesome brother and saxophone playing musician. And
yeah, no, no one's believing this bit, and
so we're going to say goodbye, and let's hope the second set goes good.
yeah, thank you, Tom.